Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to walk you through the process that I used to put together my entry into last year's Armies on Parade. Decided to do the Shire. All my projects pretty much always start off with XPS foam, so here I am just sort of trying to work out the broad layout. It changes quite a bit as I go. Each year I try and use a couple of new techniques that I haven't tried before, so this scrunched up paper and the plaster cloth that you see here I've never used before, and it really turned out well. This plaster cloth is great for setting a solid substrate. It's surprisingly strong for how thin it is. And then here we have the obligatory sculptor mold or sculptor mix depending on where you're from. Doesn't look like much yet, but it didn't really need to at this point. So these rocks that you're looking at here, they're cast from plaster of Paris. They're Woodland Scenics molds, and I had a whole bunch of them sitting around, so this was a good excuse to use them. My intention was always to use primarily the sculptor mold. It gets relatively heavy. It's not the heaviest material in the world, but it is incredibly strong once it cures or dries. And you can sculpt it, you can paint on it, you can glue it. It's a fantastic material. Using the old Proxxon hot wire cutter there, so these cuts look terrible, but again, they don't need to be particularly accurate. I just need a rough sort of guide for where my Hobbit doors are going to be. Speaking of Hobbit doors, here is a Hobbit door. The actual doors were 3D printed on my Anycubic Photon, and the rest of the facade is just using offcuts of XPS foam cut into shapes that I thought might look good. It turns out that yeah, like architecture is an art and a science in itself, and I just whacked on bits and pieces that I thought sort of looked like they made sense. I really should have taken more time in the design here, but I didn't. I was also worried that the 3D printed part was going to look really out of place compared to the sort of scrappy work that I did on the rest of the facade. It turned out fine. I should have printed another 3D, like a plastic window probably. The toothpicks just for making the wood grain kind of texture. And here is a few stages onwards. So these are using the old Games Workshop paints. I've actually airbrushed the what would you call it? Yeah, the front of the facade, and then I've just using some real basic painting approaches here. You need a gold door, obviously. You need a green door because they're the iconic ones from the movies and the books, really. So yes, I'd been meaning to, and then I actually completely forgot to draw a little glowing rune on the door, potentially out of some glowing paint, but wouldn't have been able to see it in Games Workshop anyway. Washing the timber. Wash always makes a difference. It's always a sort of I think apart from doing flock, washing stuff is probably one of the most satisfying steps of this hobby, because it really lets the detail sort of jump out and come to life. So this is obviously everything has been sculptor molded and set. So this is just standard house paint. I think in the States they call it latex paint, maybe in the UK as well. This is just standard interior house paint, chocolate brown, I guess. You're not going to see you're not going to see most of it. It's just to cover cover the base literally, just in case. But when it comes to terrain, every little bit adds up, and so the brown, which will be underneath the flock when I put it on, will set some tonal values for how the green grass and things look like on top of it. A few stepping stones there, and this you can see that I've put the Hobbit doors in with some extra sculptor mold. Should have done that before painting it, but anyway. This is, so here's a lesson. The grey rocks there, they're the woodland scenics ones, plaster of Paris ones as well. That grey is also house paint, and I'm trying to use the leopard spotting technique here, and it took me ages to realise. So the paint just was not sticking like I was expecting it to, or like it should. And it really didn't look particularly good once it had dried, and it's because this is just the base house paint, which is designed to repel water and mess and stains and things. So entirely the wrong paint to be using for that, but I went back and sorted it out later. 3D printed barrel. This was done on my Anycubic photon as well. If you haven't done any 3D printing or you're looking to get into it, Anycubic photon is a good place to start. I didn't get the footage for all the little bits and bobs that I did, but you can see them on the mat there. There's little treasure chests and some tables which didn't end up making it in. Scale was a bit of an issue in this project. You know, if you've seen the movies or any of the making of Lord of the Rings, you know that part of their challenge was scale and perspective as well. So some of these parts didn't go into the final diorama. And there I just tried to wash my brush, but it didn't go in the water. Cool little bag of beans or whatever. That's 3D printed as well. This, you see the size compared to the paint pot, you get an idea of how well resin printers do in terms of small scale detail. Very happy with those. I've kept that file. I'll definitely use more of them in the future for I don't know what. Water and PVA. Obviously I've already started doing the road there. Standard sort of terrain glue mix, and here I'm using a sort of tricolour method. So obviously that was the dark green, we got the light green, and then on top comes the mid-tone. And once this is all shaken off, it's a really easy way to get quite a organic spread of colours, I suppose. More woodland scenics clump foliage here. Just doing basically a hedgerow. Initially this was all going to be like a forest or something like that, but the trees were going to get in the way, so I changed my mind and went and got some of these little cabbages and cauliflowers, completely the wrong scale. I think they're HO at smallest. Shelley spotted these at the little railway exhibition, and they've been sitting in my cupboard ever since. But yeah, cool little things. Very large compared to a Hobbit, but it didn't end up mattering. Obviously having to use a power drill this late in the game because I changed my mind about what was going to be here. I decided to just wash them with a bit of Agrax Earthshade or something like that, a brown wash, just to bring out a little bit more detail. The leaves are paper, so just to give them a little bit more tonal variation. This is setting up the fishing pier. That barrel's just as a temporary stand. Those planks are 3D printed. Pretty straightforward. Just measuring these, I guess, are they pylons? Yeah, that set was from an OpenForge, set. You can get them on Thingiverse. And now we have everybody's favorite part of the process is setting up the more details in the grass. So obviously I've already used some static grass. It's a combination of Nock, Summer, and mini nature, I'm pretty sure. And then here we're just coming over the top or adjacent with some woodland scenics, light green coarse turf. And part of the reason why I wanted to do this project was that, yeah, it's always fun laying grass and greenery down, and I did really want to experiment with, so there's 3 layers here. Obviously there's the fine turf, there's the coarse turf that's going on now, and then the static grass. So there are 3 physical heights to it, and it really does, that variety really does lend itself to, I guess, a slightly wild look, if that makes sense. And basically you can't overdo it, which is fun. Don't know where I went there. More of the same. Now, so those fences, they're 3D printed as well, and this Hobbit house was going to be, there was going to be, I guess, tables and things out the front. But the scale for what I'd printed was completely out of whack, so I just decided to turn it into a garden. Spattering of pre-made tufts. Those are from Gamer Grass. See the vines there? They're from Mini Nature as well. I think they're the late summer vines. And that's red flowers from Ground Up Scenery, which is quite a funny name. Some more Woodland Scenics products there. More vines. See, when you start laying vines, you sort of start to think that in the real world, you realize that they don't just sit on top of things randomly, like they start from somewhere. So I had to do some thinking about how vines behave, which is something that you don't normally expect to do when you're making a War Games diorama, but there you have it. So just building a very temporary dam. This didn't need to be strong at all, because I decided to use this product, which looks delicious, and it also looks far too blue for what you would expect, but it dries much darker, as you'll see. And yeah, it's very opaque. I was going to use 2-part epoxy, but I didn't have any, and I had this. It wasn't particularly cheap. It's MIG Deep Ocean mixed with some Pacific Waters, I think, is the name of it. It smells terrible. Very viscous, and you'll see that it really does lend itself to. It holds the peaks quite well, although over time it does settle down, and it does dry out and reduce in volume. So I did have some trouble getting it underneath the pier, but it wasn't the end of the world at the end of the day. I would use this if I was doing maybe like a battleship diorama or something that was more predominantly water. I think is probably what this product is more designed for. You'll see shortly I try and dangle the, put a barrel floating in the water there. And I did try and dangle it in there with a piece of tape because I was worried it was going to sink, but it was so viscous that I didn't need to worry about that in the end. Yeah, there it is. And having quite recently actually been to the Shire in New Zealand as a surprise present from a special person who's editing this video. The lake water is much more still than what I'm doing here, but I think just for visual interest, given that I'm not trying to make a one-to-one sort of replication here, a bit of motion in the water just made it look more interesting. And you'll see once it dries, it didn't look out of place. See that little wagon wheel at the back there? That was from a train show. The little treasure chest, that's 3D printed. And then this is sort of supposed to be the big tree that that they sit in front of. That's foreground summer leaves on top there, and there was Hobby Tack latex glue, which is great glue, very handy for this kind of application. So that's it, really. There's a few other shots that I didn't get. It was painful enough doing this while having to film it all as well. But you'll see there's a few. So obviously I painted the miniatures afterwards. Didn't really leave myself enough time. There's Aragorn harvesting some cauliflowers and some hobbits collecting some berries as well. Gimli and Samwise roasting a pig. And Legolas he was over there somewhere on the pier doing some fishing with his bow and arrow. So thanks for watching. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments. Share, like and subscribe, and stay tuned for another video. Bye for now.